There's one thing that's coming up that people are beginning to compare Barack Obama's administration to the failed administration of Jimmy Carter. But, an actual better comparison is to the Roosevelt administration of the 1930s and 1940s. And we can look at this with the help of an excellent article written by a colleague of mine, Dr. Lawrence Reed. He's the president of the Foundation for Economic Education in New York. And the title is, and the title is available at my website, as well as the website for the Foundation for Economic Education. And the title of the article is The Great Myths of the Great Depression. And it's by Dr. Lawrence Reed. And it turns out that, now just listen to this. During the first year of FDR's administration, his New Deal, he called for increasing federal spending to $10 billion, while revenues were only $3 billion. Between 1933 and 1936, government expenditures rose by more than 83%, and federal debt skyrocketed by 73%. President Roosevelt signed off on legislation that raised the top tax bracket to 79%, and then later to 90%. And Hillsdale College economics professor, and his historian, Bert Folsom, he's the author of a book called, a recent new book, I think it was last year. It's called New Deal or Raw Deal. Bert Folsom notes that in 1941, President Roosevelt proposed a 99.5% marginal tax rate on all incomes over $100,000. When Roosevelt's top advisor questioned him about the idea, Roosevelt replied, quote, "Why not?" President Roosevelt had other ideas for stimulating the economy. That included the National Recovery Act. The economic impact, they called the NRA, was immediate and powerful. It drove unemployment even higher than what it was, and industrial production dropped. And it turns out, you hear so many black Americans, worshiping Roosevelt now. But blacks were very hard hit by the National Recovery Act, the NRA. As a matter of fact, during the 30s, black spokesmen and black press often referred to the NRA as the Negro runaround, or Negroes rarely allowed, or Negroes ruined again, or Negroes robbed again, and also no Roosevelt again. And a matter of fact, the courts eventually ruled the NRA unconstitutional, and as a result of that court ruling, unemployment fell to 14% by 1936, and even lower by 1937. But it remained very high. And by the way, for those pundits out there saying that Obama cannot win the election because unemployment was so high, well, President Roosevelt won elections when unemployment was 20%, much higher than what it is today. So unemployment, high unemployment is no guarantee that Obama will lose the election. And by the way, folks, there's something very disgusting to me. It's unrelated to this particular set of ideas I'm talking about right now. But there's a fraudulent column that was written, and it was attributed to me, and I did not write it at all, saying that Obama was a shoo-in. He would never lose the election. And it's been going around the country. And people have said, Williams, can you write why do you say this? Blah, 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 blah. It turns out to be a fraudulent column. And I have it listed. I have the apology for it listed at my website at walterwilliams.com. And it's titled, Apology for Fraudulent Article About Obama's 2012 Election. Anyway, but continuing about Obama and Roosevelt, Roosevelt's agenda, his ideas, was not without its international admirers. The chief Nazi newspaper, Volkskaiser Bachter, something like that, repeatedly, quote, praised Roosevelt's adoption of National Socialist strains of thought in his economic and social policies, close quote. And again, they praised him for, quote, the development towards an authoritarian state based on the demand that the collective good will be put before the individual self-interest. Roosevelt himself called Mussolini admirable, and professed that he was deeply impressed by what Mussolini accomplished, maybe making the trains run on time. And Roosevelt's very own secretary, Henry Morgenthau, he saw the folly of the New Deal, and Henry Morgenthau wrote, "We have tried spending, quote, we have tried spending money. We're spending more than we've ever spent before, and it does not work. We have not made good on our promises. I say after 8 years of this administration, we have just as much unemployment as we started and an enormous debt to boot." That is, here's what Roosevelt's a New Deal accomplished. His New Deal policies turned what would have been a sharp 3 or 4 year downturn in the economy into a 16-year affair. And so the 1930s depression and the problems that we're having today are caused by and aggravated by acts of government. And this is the reason why we're in the mess that we have today. And so we have to ask ourselves, do we want to repeat history by listening to those people who created the calamity? I mean, listening to the politicians today, both Democrats and Republicans, in terms of what to do, that's like calling on an arsonist to help you put out the fire. The arsonist caused the fire, and here you are calling on him to help you put it out. And keep in mind another thing, ladies and gentlemen, that from 1787, when we became a nation, until 1930, there were recessions, there were depressions, sometimes called panics, and there's no intervention. No one thought that government should do something to get us out of the depression because it's not authorized by the United States Constitution. And when government did get in, starting with Herbert Hoover, and then later with Roosevelt, when government started messing with the economy, then they started messing things up. That is, we had the Depression from 1930 until it was after World War II, I'm sorry. The Depression did not end and did emerge and start having a better life until after the war. And so Obama, I wouldn't put him in the category with Jimmy Carter. I would put him in the category with FDR. And FDR's administration, it's painted as a wonderful administration, but it was an abject failure. We'll be back with your calls after this. Okay, it's Walter Williams.